I want to start today with a concept that sounds like it was ripped straight out of a Mary Shelley novel, but in reality, it's sitting right there in the editing suite of your favorite reality TV show. It's a word that sounds visceral, almost violent. Frankenbite.
It definitely paints a vivid picture, and honestly, the definition is just as stitched together as the name implies.
It's one of those industry terms that once you know it, you can never unknow it. For everyone listening, a frankenbite is essentially audio alchemy. It's a slang term used in video editing, specifically reality television, where an editor takes dialogue from multiple different interviews or, different parts of the same interview and just stitches them together.
Right, they're cutting words or even syllables to make a person say something they never actually said in that specific order.
Or not in that way at all.
Or in the more extreme cases, and this is where it gets ethically murky, something they never intended to say at all.
It's the audio equivalent of a ransom note cut out of magazine letters, where you paste I from a fashion magazine and Hey VE from a cooking magazine.
That is a terrifying but completely accurate analogy. You're pasting together meaning from scraps.
When I first heard that definition, my immediate reaction was, wait, is that legal? Is that ethical? It feels like lying. It feels like fraud. But what we found in the research for today's deep dive is that it is absolutely industry standard. It happens constantly.
And that is the mission for today. We aren't just talking about, fake news or misleading clips. We're going to explore the dark arts of editing. We're going to look at the mechanics of how this audio manipulation happens, the technical wizardry required to fool your ear, but then we're going to go much deeper.
We're going to the brain.
We are. We're going to look at the neuroscience of why it works. Because it turns out film editing literally rewires how our brains process emotion.
We are talking about how the human brain is practically hardwired to be manipulated by cuts and splices.
Precisely. It's not a bug in our system. It's a feature that editors exploit.
To get us there, we have a really interesting stack of sources today. We have technical insights from a professional dialogue editor, April Tucker, who breaks down the nuts and bolts of the Frankenbite. We have psychological analysis on how reality TV warps our perception of relationships. And then, the heavy hitter, a dense, absolutely fascinating scientific study from the journal PLOS-1.
Which uses fMRI scans to re-examine a 100-year-old film theory called the Kuleshov effect.
It is mind-blowing stuff. So let's unpack this. Let's start with the Frankenbite itself. We're drawing here from April Tucker's breakdown on dialogue editing. The first question I have is simply, why? Why do editors do this? Is it just to be evil masterminds creating drama where there is none?
Not always, and I think that's an important distinction to make early on. It's easy to vilify the editors, but Tucker points out the sheer scale of the job. Editors are often dealing with hundreds, maybe thousands of hours of footage. They have to condense that massive amount of data into a story that plays out in 40 minutes.
Right. Real people don't talk in sound bites. We aren't scripted characters. If someone mumbles a crucial piece of information, or they stumble over their words, or they take 10 minutes to tell a 2-minute story, the editor has a problem.
Exactly. Tucker calls these the benevolent uses. Clarifying a mumbled sentence, fixing a grammatical error, or just getting a story point across quickly so the viewer doesn't get bored. If a subject says, I went to the, the store, an editor might just cut it to, I went to the store. That's a Frankenbite, technically, but it's helpful. It respects the viewer's time.
It makes the speaker sound more articulate than they actually are. I feel like I need a personal editor to follow me around and Frankenbite my life so I sound smarter.
We all could use a little tighten up in post-production. But then, of course, we have the other side of the coin. Tucker explicitly mentions that Frankenbites are frequently used to increase drama or fundamentally change the audience's view of a character. You can take a sentence from a moment where someone was joking, splice it into a moment where they're crying, and suddenly you have a psychopath.
That is the dark arts part. But here is where it gets really interesting to me, the technical, impossible puzzle of doing this. Because I've tried to edit audio before, just for simple projects. If I try to cut 2 words together from different sentences, it sounds terrible. It sounds like a glitch. It pops. The tone doesn't match. How are they making this sound natural?
It is incredibly difficult. Tucker lists the challenges, and when you hear them, you realize just how skilled these editors are. It's not just cut and paste. The first major hurdle she identifies is timbre.
Timbre. That's the texture or the color of the voice, right?
Right. It's the characteristic quality of the sound. Your voice isn't static. It changes based on the time of day. Are you tired? Are you sick? Have you been talking for 4 hours? If you take a word recorded at 9 a.m. after a coffee, where your voice is tight and bright, and splice it next to a word recorded at 6 p.m. when you're exhausted and your vocal cords are loose?
The listener's brain knows something is wrong.
Something is very wrong.
Even if we can't articulate why, we hear the shift. It feels uncanny. Like when you talk to someone on the phone and the connection flickers.
Exactly. It triggers a subconscious alarm. The brain says, these two sounds don't belong to the same timeline. Then you have pitch. Pitch is tied directly to emotional intensity. You cannot splice a word spoken in a bored, monotone voice next to a word spoken in a high-intensity, excited voice. It sounds robotic. It sounds like a bad GPS navigation voice from 2005.
Turn left at the climax.
That is exactly what it sounds like. And the third, and perhaps the hardest challenge Tucker outlines, is environment. The room tone.
This is one of those things I never thought about until I read this source. Room tone.
Oh.
It's the background noise, right? The silence that isn't really silence.
Yes. Every room has a sound. Even a quiet room. There's the hum of the HVAC, the buzz of a refrigerator, distant traffic, the way sound bounces off the walls. Let's say the editor wants to construct a sentence. Half the words come from an interview done in a large, reverberant hallway. You have that echoey, hollow sound. The other half come from an interview done outside where there are crickets chirping and a river flowing in the background.
You can't just mash those together. The river would cut in and out between words. It would sound like a radio switching channels. I went to. Sound of a cricket at the store.
It would be a disaster. It would pull the viewer right out of the story because the sonic landscape is jumping around. The brain relies on the background sound to establish continuity. If the background changes, the brain assumes the scene has changed.
So how do they fool us? If the river cuts out, I'm going to notice. What is the fix?
Tucker outlines a few tricks of the trade, and this is where the alchemy comes in. The first is filling. The dialogue editor will take that background noise, the river, the crickets, and they will find a section of it where no one is talking. They create a separate audio track of just that noise.
Okay, so a track of pure atmosphere.
Right. And then they layer it underneath the entire sentence, including the parts recorded indoors.
So they're artificially adding the river to the indoor parts so the background sound doesn't drop out.
Precisely. It creates a floor of sound, a consistent sonic bed that tricks your ear into thinking it's one continuous moment. Your brain hears the river and assumes continuity, even if the voice timbre shifts slightly. The noise floor acts like glue.
That is so sneaky. It's like using a heavy sauce to mask the fact that you're using two different types of pasta.
That's a great metaphor. And it gets sneakier. If the indoor room has a lot of echo reverb and the outdoor shot is dry, they might use plugins to add artificial reverb to the outdoor dialogue to match the room. They're essentially painting the audio environment to make it consistent. They are matching the acoustics of a room that the person wasn't even in.
And I assume this is where the visual editing comes in, too. We aren't just listening to these shows, we're watching them.
Correct. Tucker mentions a trick by picture editor Vince Roca. It's the cutaway. If the audio edit is tricky, or if the lips don't match the new sentence you've built, you cut away from the speaker's face. You show a reaction shot of someone else, or a shot of a hand, or the scenery.
The visual distraction.
Exactly. If you can't see the lips moving, your brain is significantly less critical of the audio glitches. You process the information without verifying the source. You hear the voice, you see a vase of flowers, and you accept that the person is still talking.
I feel like I'm going to be watching TV with a completely different set of eyes now.
Yeah.
Every time the camera cuts away while someone is talking, I'm going to assume it's a frankenbite.
It's a safe bet. If the camera is on a vase of flowers while the main character is delivering a bombshell revelation, be suspicious. And here's one more detail from Tucker that I found fascinating. When they are selecting microphones to record these bits that will eventually be frankenbited, they don't pick the best-sounding microphone.
Why not? Wouldn't you want the highest fidelity?
No. You want the microphone that sounds the closest to the other clips you already have. You are prioritizing continuity over quality. The goal is the illusion of consistency. If you have a high-fidelity studio mic spliced next to a grainy lapel mic, the game is up. So they degrade the quality to match the lowest common denominator.
That is wild. It's like painting a masterpiece but using the wrong shade of blue just because it matches the smudge you made earlier.
That is audio editing in a nutshell. It's the art of the smudge.
So we've established that editors are audio alchemists. They can twist reality using these technical tools. But let's zoom out a bit. What does this do to us as viewers? We have this source on the psychology of reality TV, and it argues that this isn't just harmless entertainment. It's actually warping our perception of reality.
This is where we move from the how to the so what. The core concept here is the highlight reel effect. The source material argues that what we see on screen is a polished, hyper-edited version of life.
Which we know, logically. We know it's edited, we see the credits roll, we know there are producers.
I know it logically, but do we process it emotionally that way? That's the question. The expert insight here is that the danger lies in normalization. Viewers begin to believe that this intensity, this constant conflict, the snappy comebacks, the dramatic pauses, is normal. Real life is mostly ordinary, boring moments. It's silence, it's awkwardness, it's asking, "What did you say?" 3 times. Reality TV strips those away.
It's like eating nothing but refined sugar and then wondering why an apple tastes bland.
Exactly. We become desensitized to the slow burn of real interaction. And the producers have very specific tools to do this. We talked about frankenbites, but they also use the confessional.
Those serve the narrative, right? Here's what I was thinking in that moment. It's the storytelling device.
But think about the timeline. Often those confessionals are filmed days or weeks later. Producers ask specific questions to hammer home a viewpoint. They are coaching the narrative. So you're watching a scene unfold and then you cut to the person explaining how angry they were. But in reality, they are sitting in a comfortable chair 2 weeks later, being prompted to say it again, but angrier.
And then there is sequencing. That's another term that came up.
Right. By carefully selecting the order of footage, producers can create a narrative of conflict that didn't necessarily happen that way. Let's say you tell a joke and I laugh. Then later, you say something mean and I frown. An editor can take my laugh and put it after your mean comment. Now, instead of being hurt, I look like a sociopath who laughs at cruelty.
That is terrifying. Can you give an example of what that implies for the viewer? How does that actually hurt us beyond just being misled about a celebrity?
Well, look at relationships. The source warns that viewers may start believing that high-drama, conflict-heavy relationships are healthy or typical. If every conversation on TV ends in a drink being thrown or a table being flipped, and that's your primary diet of relationship modeling, your own calm, communicative relationship might seem lacking.
Or worse, you might start creating drama just to feel like you're in a real relationship. Why aren't we fighting? Do we not have passion?
That is the risk. You start performing for an invisible camera. The source actually warns that excessive consumption can harm critical thinking skills because sensationalism overshadows factual accuracy. We get used to the emotional hit rather than the logical progression. We stop asking, "Does this make sense?" and start asking, "Does this feel intense?"
To be fair, the source did mention some positives. It's not all brain rot. Shows like Shark Tank encourage business, or shows discussing body positivity can be empowering.
True, the content can be positive. But the structure, the manipulation of time and reaction remains the same regardless of the topic. The mechanism of delivery is still edited reality.
So what's the defense? How do we watch this stuff safely?
Media literacy. Knowing it's happening, understanding that editing manipulates emotions. But to really understand how deep that manipulation goes, we have to leave the editing suite and look at the brain itself. Because it's not just that we are being tricked, it's that our brains are actively participating in the trick.
This brings us to the heavy hitter of today's deep dive, the Kuleshov effect.
Yeah.
We have this new study from PLOS One that revisits a Soviet film experiment from the 1920s. This is really the foundation of all modern editing, isn't it?
It is. Lev Kuleshov. He was a Soviet filmmaker in the 1920s, and he conducted what is arguably the most famous experiment in film history. He wanted to prove that the cut was more important than the acting. He was essentially arguing that the editor is the true director.
Lay it out for us. What did he actually do?
The original experiment was deceptively simple. He took a shot of a famous actor of the time, Ivan Mishkin. It was a close-up of his face, completely neutral, no emotion, just a blank stare.
Okay, so just a deadpan look, like a passport photo.
Exactly. Then he took that exact same footage and spliced it next to 3 different images. First, a bowl of hot soup. Second, a dead girl in a coffin. And third, a child playing with a toy.
Same face every time.
The exact same footage of the face. He showed these combinations to audiences, and here's the result. Audiences raved about the acting. When they saw the face paired with the soup, they said he looked pensive or hungry. When they saw the face paired with the coffin, they saw deep sorrow, and with the child, they saw light and happiness.
The face never changed.
Never. The audience projected the emotion onto the face based on the context. This is the core of montage theory, the idea that 1 + 1 is greater than 2. The combination of images creates a new meaning that isn't in either image alone.
That is fascinating. It's like the brain refuses to see a disconnect. It says, he's looking at soup, therefore he must be hungry. It fills in the gap.
Exactly. It creates a bridge between 2 unrelated images. But here is the catch. For decades, scientists have argued about this. The original footage from the 1920s was lost. Early experiments didn't have controls, and when people tried to replicate it scientifically in the modern era, they often failed.
Why did they fail? If it's such a fundamental rule of film, shouldn't it be easy to prove?
You would think so, but many researchers used static photos, or they used weird zoom-ins that didn't look like real movies.
Yeah.
If you show someone a passport photo and then a picture of soup, the brain doesn't necessarily connect them as a narrative. It just sees two pictures sitting next to each other.
So the film aspect matters, the movement, the continuity.
Precisely. The immersion matters, and that is what this new study in PLOS1 did differently. They wanted authentic film conditions. They didn't just grab stock photos. They hired a professional theme director and a crew.
They went full Hollywood on this study.
They did. They shot 30 actors, 15 male, 15 female, doing absolutely neutral expressions against a blue screen. Then they shot high-quality emotional scenes. They had fearful scenes, peeping toms, murders, ghosts. They had happy scenes, food, attractive people, cute things, and neutral scenes, printers, bus stops.
A printer is definitely the most neutral, boring thing I can think of. Maybe slightly frustrating if it's out of toner.
It really is. It's the baseline. And they edited these together using a very specific technique called the shot reverse shot, or POV structure.
POV meaning point of view.
Yes. The structure was 1, face, the glance shot, 2, the scene, which is the object shot, what they are looking at, and then 3, back to the face, the return to the glance.
So we see the guy look, we see what he sees, and we see him look again. That's standard cinema grammar.
Exactly. And the behavioral results were definitive. It worked. When participants saw a neutral face paired with a fearful scene, they rated the face, not the scene, the face, as having negative valence. They thought the actor looked scared or unhappy. When paired with a happy scene, they rated the same neutral face as positive.
So the context-dependent bias is real. The emotional scene fundamentally changed how the viewer interpreted the neutral expression.
It did. But this study didn't just stop at asking people what they felt. That's subjective. They wanted objective data. So they put the participants in an MRI scanner.
This is where it gets really interesting. We're finally looking under the hood. What is happening inside the brain when we were being manipulated like this?
They compared the brain activity from the first time the face was shown, so before the scene, to the second time the face was shown, after the scene. Remember, the visual input is identical. It's the same clip. So theoretically, if the brain worked like a camera, the activity should be the same.
Unless the brain has changed its mind.
Exactly. And the differences were staggering. Let's look at the fearful context first. When the viewers saw the face after seeing the scary scene, the MRI lit up in specific areas. The insula, which handles emotional processing and visceral feeling. The amygdala, which is our threat detection center.
The fear center. That makes sense. We see something scary, the amygdala lights up.
Right. But here is the kicker, and this is the technical insight that blew my mind. The pre-central and post-central gyrus lit up.
Okay, break that down. What do those areas do?
Those are areas involved in motor control and somatosensory processing. They are involved in planning movement, fight or flight preparation.
Wait, so looking at a neutral face made the viewer's brain prepare for a physical fight?
Because the brain had connected that face to the threat. The brain isn't just seeing a face anymore. It is preparing the body for action based on what the character saw. It's embodying the character's experience. You are physically syncing with the narrative. Your brain is rehearsing the motor plan to run away from the ghost that the actor is looking at.
That is incredible. The edit actually mobilized the viewer's body. What about the happy context?
Different pathway entirely. The limbic system and reward pathways lit up, specifically the precuneus, which has been linked to subjective happiness and self-reflection. The brain was rewarding the viewer for the connection.
But the most fascinating part of the study for me was the mention of theory of mind. Can you explain that concept?
This is the aha moment regarding why we care about characters. They saw high activation in the ACC, the anterior cingulate cortex, and the IPL, the inferior parietal lobe. These areas are heavily involved in theory of mind, which is the cognitive ability to attribute mental states to others. To understand that someone else has beliefs, desires, and intentions different from your own.
So, reading minds.
Trying to. The expert explanation here is that the viewer's brain is actively trying to read the mind of the actor. The viewer is projecting an internal state onto the actor based on the context. He is looking at a ghost, therefore he must be scared. The brain is filling in the gap with a psychological narrative.
It's constructing reality.
Yes. The study concludes that the brain creates new meaning. The neural activity for the second phase was totally different from the first phase. The brain does not record reality like a camera. It constructs reality based on context. It builds a model of the world that includes invisible things like emotions and intentions.
So if we connect this back to the bigger picture, looking at Frankenbites, looking at reality TV.
It explains why the Frankenbite works.
Right, because our brains are desperate for continuity. We are wired to make sense of the sequence.
April Tucker talked about filling the background noise and adding reverb. That creates the sonic continuity. The picture editor uses the cutaway to hide the visual glitch. And because of the Kuleshov effect, if the audio sounds continuous and the visual sequence implies a reaction, our brains will do the work to smooth over the cracks.
We become accomplices in our own deception. We want the narrative to make sense, so we subconsciously ignore the little glitches or the mismatched pitch, and we project the emotion that the editor wants us to feel.
Precisely. The editor provides the dots, but our brain draws the line connecting them. And because we drew the line, because it happened inside our own precentral gyrus and amygdala, we believe it's true. We trust our own brains.
That is somewhat terrifying, but also explains why cinema is such a powerful art form. It's leveraging the bugs in our operating system.
Or features, depending on how you look at it. It's leveraging our ability to empathize and predict. Without this mechanism, movies would just be a series of flashing lights. We wouldn't feel anything.
True. It allows for empathy, but it also allows for manipulation. Now, before we wrap up, this brings up a provocative thought for me. We've talked about film editors changing a neutral face into a sad one. We've talked about dialogue editors splicing words to change the meaning.
Right.
If our brains are this good at editing, at smoothing over cracks, at projecting context onto neutral events, how much of our own memory is just a Frankenbite?
That is a profound question.
Think about it. We don't remember every second of our lives. We remember highlights. We remember the confessional moments where we told ourselves a story about what happened. Are we the editors of our own life story, creating Frankenbites of our past experiences to fit the narrative we want to believe?
It's very likely. We know memory is reconstructive. We don't pull a file from a cabinet. We rebuild the memory every time we access it. So, in a way, we are constantly re-editing our own documentary. We might be splicing a morning voice memory into an evening party context without even realizing it. We might be adding a scary soundtrack to a neutral memory because we're currently anxious.
That is something I've been thinking about for a long time. The idea that my past is just a really well-edited reality show in my own head.
You too. It makes you question the raw footage of your own life.
Yeah, so to the listener, the next time you turn on the TV or watch a movie or even just scroll through a friend's curated social media story, listen closely. Look for the cutaways. Listen for the shift in room tone.
And remember that what you are feeling might not be what is on the screen, but what is happening inside your own head.
Thanks for diving deep with us today.
A pleasure as always.
We'll see you on the next one.